Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to have you here this morning. I'm looking forward to hosting the hour-long conversation webinar event to talk about GEPF benefits and GEPF members, retirement planning and estate planning. I've got some very esteemed Old Mutual and industry colleagues joining me in the conversation today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you in a minute. I just want to, before we start, inform everybody, all the attendees, we are going to be running polls during the conversation to allow you to give your input and feedback as well. So the conversation isn't only one-sided, and I would like to invite you to participate in the polls and share your views and insights with us by responding to the questions in the polls. So let me start off by introducing myself. My name is Liesl Budram. I am the Head of Advice for Old Mutual Personal Finance. In this function, I am very passionate about financial planning and advice and making sure that as an organization and as an industry, we enable members of all retirement funds, all consumers of financial services and financial products to live their best financial life, to make sure that they are confident and enabled and informed to make financial decisions to reach the best possible financial outcomes for themselves and their families and dependents. So that's my function and my passion, and that's why I'm here today. I would also like to invite my colleague from Old Mutual called Carl Miller into the conversation. Carl is a senior legal advisor with Old Mutual. He has unrivaled expertise and experience when it comes to technical retirement planning and specifically GEPF benefits and tax implications at retirement, disability, as well as death. So Carl is going to support us today by answering some of the more technical questions that you may pose in the chat. So please feel free, if you've got any technical questions, to pose it in the chat. We will bring that into the conversation as well, but Carl will make sure that we answer that. And I'm now going to hand over to Maya. Maya is going to introduce herself. Maya, over to you.
Thank you. So my name is Maya Fisher-French. I'm a personal financial journalist, but I have a lot of GEPF members following me, and especially when I write in City Press. So I've become very, very au fait with the rules of the GEPF to the extent that I actually am working with the GEPF on educational series for members. So I'm quite excited about being here today, because I really think that we don't talk enough about retirement planning. We worry so much about our debts and about educating our children and all of this. And then suddenly we reach the age of 60 and we've realized we've left it too late. We haven't worried about the next 20 years. And guys, the average longevity of a GEPF member is up to the age of 82. 82. So when you start working at 60, you've got to think, how are you going to where are you going to get the income for the next 22 years? So I think that's going to be part of our conversation today. So thank you, Liesl.
Thanks, Maya. Lovely having you here. We look forward to getting some insight and wisdom from you and your experience. I would like to invite Busi, our other panelist, to also introduce herself. Busi, over to you.
Thank you, Liesl. And I am totally excited to be in this meeting. And I am an international accredited money coach. I've been doing this for the past 8 years. And as Maya has said, one of the things that we have seen over the years is that a lot of people think that the day they finish work is the end of their lives, but actually it's the beginning of your life, because finally you actually have a whole 8 hours that you never had. And you know what? Sometimes you need more money for that 8 hours than when you are sitting at a desk somewhere. So this is an opportunity for everyone to just reflect and say, where am I? Why am I here? Where do I want to be? So that we can actually plan for this whole new life. I mean, a lot of South Africans, especially if you are African, you are normally thinking that the day you finish work, you do not have to do anything with your life. So you just wait for the day you die. We don't have to do this anymore. We don't have to think of our life like that. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Thanks, Busi. It's lovely to have you here as well. So now that all the members of the audience understand the expertise here at your disposal, please put your questions and comments in the chat as well, because we have got a presentation or a conversation outline prepared, but we are very happy to take steer from you. If there are certain elements or certain questions that you would like us to explore in more depth, please put them in the chat and we will definitely keep an eye on that. So I want to start off by just giving you a brief background in terms of the research finding at Old Mutual, and where we see year after year the results of our research shows that many people, in fact, most South Africans, don't take their retirement planning and their estate planning as seriously as they need to. Exactly as Busi and Maya have now pointed out to us, people arrive at retirement thinking all through their working careers that their retirement funds will be adequate to look after their retirement needs. And then they discover it's not going to be adequate at a point when it's too late. Having neglected a proper retirement plan and retirement planning conversations during their entire career. Similarly, we find many people passing away without a will at all or any kind of estate plan to ensure that the estate is in a position where it can look after dependents. So that's the purpose of these conversations, to look at, let's focus on the importance of retirement planning when there's still time and estate planning when there's still time. What needs to be in place? We know that these plans need to look after the very unique needs and situation of each individual person. We are all very different, and we need to make sure that the financial plan looks after you as individual. And that's where the financial advisor comes in, that helps craft that plan and keep the plan on track based on your specific, unique individual needs. The conversation today will focus not on your individual needs, because we are not able to give advice in a group conversation like this, but we are going to look at your unique benefits in terms of your GEPF membership. So that's the framework under which the conversation happens. It's important then to take the next step and to make sure that the plan under your GEPF benefits is crafted to your specific individual needs as an individual human being. Right. So let's jump right into it. I want to start off with a question to Maya and to Busi. If we look at people putting complete reliance on their pension fund, assuming their pension fund will provide sufficient benefit when they get to retirement, they don't need anything else. Is this something that you see GEPF members are doing, that they assume the GEPF benefit in itself will be adequate? And do they, based on that assumption, then not focus on a bigger picture retirement plan to help them plan and create a vision for their retirement? Maya, Busi, over to you.
Okay, Busi, should I start? So there's actually two answers to this question. The one is that in some sense, the GEPF is probably the best pension in South Africa in terms of autopilot. So if you were going to just say, I started when I was 25 years old, I'm working for the government all of these years, at the age of 60, I retire, you probably will have a pretty good retirement benefit. And that is because the GEPF gives you years of service, it's years of service and a factor of your final salary. So I have seen like remarkable figures coming out of GEPF, I must say, in retirement. So probably, yes, a GEPF member who started work from the first day that they worked all the way through to retirement probably had to think a little less about their retirement than perhaps somebody who's been in an actively managed fund and has to worry about whether they've contributed enough, whether returns have been enough, because the GEPF is not linked to market returns. It's linked to this promise of years of service and salary. So from that perspective, I find that they probably don't need to worry as much about it. The problem is that I don't come across that many GEPF people who've been with the GEPF since they were age 25. So it's usually because they just haven't, and before they joined GEPF, they didn't preserve pensions, they cashed in, and they've now come along and they haven't really sat down and said, what is it? What does this mean for me in retirement? And I certainly think we don't, just generally as a country, we don't ask that question. We wait literally. We get the letter saying, oh, in 6 months' time, you retire, make some choices. And it's the first time most people across the board actually look at their retirement benefit, and then they start worrying about it. So I think, yes, at any time, whether you remember the GEPF or not, to sit down, 10 years before retirement, 5 years before retirement, and starting to understand how all these little bits and pieces, and especially if you're a GEPF member who worked for a company before perhaps, or worked in a different industry, and you have preservation funds, or you've taken out retirement annuities, you do need to look at it holistically.
Awesome. Thank you, Maya. So really the answer is it depends from your perspective. Lucy, what would you like to add to that?
I think Maya has really said a mouthful. But one of the other things is to look at what do you want after retirement? Because when you take the time to check what do you have, what you don't have, also make sure that you understand how you want your life to be like. Do you want to go and see the world? Do you want to take care of your grandkids? Or you just really want to rest? You just want to go on a mountain somewhere in the east and just chill there? So understand what is it that you want to have at the end of your life. So then whatever plans you're making, make them according to that, because sometimes you could, a lot of products can tell you, oh, this is enough retirement for, but it's not, because of what you want to do. They're looking just at what they have, but also look at your health. How sick are you? Are you healthy? How have you been taking care of your life? Because that determines how long you're going to live. How are you going to live your life? So let's look at also the goal of what we want to achieve when we look at what we have.
Lucy, I must say, I can see why you're a coach. You're making retirement sound awfully appealing, with having the 8 hours to myself and sitting on a mountain in the east. Sounds wonderful. I want to get back to something that we've been seeing in the media a lot. And I think, Maya, you probably have come across this quite often in terms of GEPF members worrying about the security of their fund benefits. And we see quite a few questions and an inclination from GEPF members to want to leave the fund, to move their benefits elsewhere, or feeling nervous about keeping their benefits in the fund. Can you comment on that and tell us, are members moving their benefits out? Is it generally a good idea to be taking that type of action? Please share your experience with us.
Definitely. So I'm seeing quite a big, and I would say right now, the biggest driver, yes, I'm going to get to the fear about what happens to your retirement funds when managed by government. But I think for me, the bigger driver is debt. So I see a lot of GEPF members wanting to access their pension funds because they're in financial difficulty. And, this was pre-COVID. This had nothing to do with COVID, because you must remember many GEPF members were pretty much insulated from job losses during COVID. But debt has become a major, major problem, and also increased family dependency. And again, that only became worse with COVID from that perspective. So I see a lot of people wanting to access their pension funds, and I see them resigning. They're actually quitting their jobs to access their pension funds. We see this a lot in especially in teaching and nursing, because they can often come back on contract. So they quit, take their lump sum, and then come back in employment later on. And this is having such a devastating impact on their pension benefits. And again, it's something that it's this immediate need that's being met. And I also find that what we generally see is when you get a lump sum to settle your debt, you've settled it, and Bussy may talk to this a little bit as well, but you settle it, but you haven't made any lifestyle changes. You haven't figured out why you got in that place in the first place. So we tend to see this behavior repeated 3 or 4 times during the lifetime, because there are no changes to behavior, to debt, the way you manage your debts, or the way you invest and save have changed. But I just wanted quickly, I thought it'd be worthwhile. These are the kind of questions I promise you'll get. This is an actual real question. And I did a little slide to show you. So this is the kind of questions that I get from GEPF members. So this was Vincent. And Vincent contacted me. He's 51 years old, and he was resigning from GEPF. And he wanted to know if he took his lump sum. Now, he was earning $480,000 a year. His lump sum benefit was, 3.2 million. So he was actually very much on track. As I said, I always find GEPF members, if they've been working there for a long time, have a pretty good pension benefit. And even if you think about it, if he never added to that pension again, by the time he was 60 odd, it would be worth over 6 million, just simply by growing. But he wants to take it. And he said, what would the tax implications be? And there's massive tax that's payable on your withdrawal. So there's the tax table. The first 25,000 is tax-free, but thereafter it's taxed on a sliding scale. So the more you draw, the more you draw out, the higher the tax is going to be. So if you have a look now, basically of that 3.2 million, he's going to be paying, just do my little page down here. He's going to be, so there's little poles affecting my slide there, so I can't move it. But basically, he's going to be paying R1 million on his of tax, and I think that is something that people do not even begin to understand the implications of. I do want to try and get down here. I'm not sure if my poll is affecting my ability to go down here, but just to give you an idea, that R1 million that he's going to pay in tax is worth about 5,500 Rand a month in income in his retirement. So he's actually dropping his income in retirement as well by 5,500 Rand a month. So I think that for me is a big concern, is that people don't, and most of the time when people contact me, it's usually after the event. They've already made that decision to cash in their retirement funds, and they are generally shocked by the tax implications. So I would say that's probably primarily the reason I'm accessing it. But maybe I'll get Busi to comment, and we can maybe go back to some of the other concerns they have.
Maya, before we get to Busi, I just want to explore one point you made at the end there. When you say people usually contact you after having made and implemented the decision, how possible is it then for them to reverse that decision? If you then
they can't.
Okay, I think that's also
and the reason important. So generally what happens is the reason they contact me, I'm not a financial advisor, so don't give advice, but they trust me to give them information, I suppose. And what the reason they do it is, they take the whole lot, and then they settle some debt, but now they've got left over, and they feel that they want to invest that, and they immediately say, where can I invest it? So that's generally, what should I do with it? But they've just given away R1 million. Instead of, obviously, the best thing to do is to pay it into a preservation fund or into your new employer's fund where it can be preserved. So if Vincent had have done that, if he had left that 3.2 million and transferred it into a preservation fund, and I'm telling you, if he had not even touched it, by the time he retired, it would be worth over 6 million Rand, just simply by the growth. So it's very hard to try and explain that to people, that the cost of trying to pay off that debt with a lump sum has massive consequences to their retirement benefit.
Thank you very much, Maya. Busi, would you like to add to that from a coaching and a planning perspective? What would you advise GEPF members to focus on?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that I normally give a lot of masterclasses on. The fear of not having enough is the most critical thing that can cause someone to self-sabotage. So, I mean, you have money, you are going to be okay with this amount. Then you go on because you're fearing not having enough. You make a mistake that actually costs you a lot of money. So normally when we're in debt, we are not in debt because we don't afford. We are in debt because we fear. Most of the reasons when you have debt that is not a good debt, when you have bad debt, is because you are fearing that you don't have something. So it is so important for us to understand our financial situation. Again, like Maya said, what the plan will give you at the end depends on what you should be doing with your life at the end. Do you need a monthly income that is stable, that's going to take care of you for the rest of your life? Or do you want to go and start a business and, do all sorts of things? So if you're saying, I have, if I cash in and I get this lump sum and I want to start a business, maybe that is a good idea. Maybe it's okay to lose R1 million to create 20 million Rand, if that is what you want. But if you're going to be losing R1 million that you actually needed to take care of you for the rest of your life, then you've really messed up a lot. So let's try not fear the fact that we don't have enough. Let's get information. Let's understand where we are right now. Let's also understand what we want to have at the end of this. Because if we're going to be using this money for things that are going to create more debt for us, then it's not going to work anyway.
Okay, so I think also linking to Maya's point, making sure what's a right decision for one person is not necessarily the right decision for another person, but making sure that you have all the information and understand the implications when you make the decision. Okay, thank you. I think that's such an important point. I'm looking at the chat and I'm seeing a few questions on death benefits, Maya. So I wonder whether you just want to talk us through on a very high level the death benefits payable by the GEPF. Specifically, I see there's one question about death happening 5 years after retirement. So it's a person who has retired from the GEPF with dependent and non-dependent children, the implications. And then there's another question about death happening while still being a member pre-retirement.
So this is a big one for GEPF members. So it's not GEPF members, it's anybody who annuitizes on retirement. So this 5-year thing is quite key. So even if you were in the private sector and you chose to buy a life annuity, and this is effectively what GEPF is, except that GEPF bases its value on the years of service. Whereas if you're in the private sector, you buy a life annuity, and for every 1 million rand, you probably get about 5,000 rand a month income. But on your death, the income stops because you are the life insured. And it's very similar with the GEPF, except that the GEPF offers you a spousal pension as well. So if you pass away in retirement and you have a spouse, your spouse will continue to get between 50% of the benefit, unless you've chosen to increase that to 75%. But let's just say 50% of the benefit. So that is what you get for the GEPF. If you die within the first 5 years, there is then a benefit that is paid to your beneficiaries as well within the first 5 years of retirement. After 5 years, then the benefits only apply to a spouse. So that's where that 5 year comes in. And that's pretty consistent. We see it across most life annuities in the industry. I'm sure Old Mutual will comment on that. You can pay more and get sort of a 10-year guarantee, but for most of them, it's that 5-year guarantee. And then before retirement, if you die before retirement, then there are death benefits as well. And that also depends. It's a little more complicated whether your years of service are less than 10 years of service, or if you had more than 10 years of service. But if you've had more than 10 years of service, there's also not only is a lump sum payable to beneficiaries, but your spouse also gets a pension for life. So there are extremely rich benefits built into the GEPF in terms of those options. The one thing that I find light on GEPF, actually, I think all of those are pretty good benefits, is funeral cover. So that's the one thing that I find people, its funeral cover is relatively low. I think it's 15,000 Rand or so, which for many people, and it doesn't provide for extended families. That's the one area that I do find that GEPF members have an issue. But I see another question, the 5 years. If the retiree passes away and they have a minor child after 5 years, so there again, that would be, it's not that usual, I suppose, to have a minor child. But if there is a minor child, there would be a parent, and that parent could be, as long as you've made them your spouse. And by the way, you don't have to be married to have a spouse. A lifetime partner. So you could register the parent of that child as your lifetime partner, and that parent would then receive that lifetime benefit. Yeah.
Thank you. I see another question that I also just want to chat about briefly. I see it's MG has got a question. At the age of 56, really keen to go and study full-time, obviously something that's a passion, and I think Busi is making early retirement sound even more appealing. So the implications and the considerations of taking early retirement, Maya, do you want to comment on that for us?
Yes, so early retirement, there was that window of opportunity, but I don't think it's open any longer. Government did make early retirement an option. I actually have, it's a pity I'm having a problem with my slides. I actually do have a slide that shows the impact of early retirement. So if I get my slides working just now, but something's been affected since the poll went up. But so early retirement, you can take early retirement after the age of 55, but it has two consequences. One, there is a penalty. So it is penalized. So your number of years of service, there is actually a further penalty on years of service that's applied. And of course, there are already less years of service. So if you were going to work till 60, you would have had an extra 5 years of service. So A, you're missing out on those 5 years of service, and B, there is a penalty that's applied because although government did offer a sort of a window of opportunity, I think 2 years ago, because they were trying to obviously lower the number of government employees. So they made it a little bit more attractive to leave. But I think that window is now closed. So you would have a penalty applied, plus you would lose those 5 years of service. So not saying that that's a bad thing. As Busi said, you may have lifestyle choices. You want to start a business, all of those sorts of things. There are opportunities there. I think what's important for you at this point is to decide what you do if you take early retirement. So you are going to get a gratuity. Your gratuity is based on also on years of service. And, for me, this is another one. I find that people want to leave a legacy for their kids. But if you're also starting a business, you can take that gratuity. Your first 500,000 Rands tax-free. And that could be a great way to boost your business. Maybe you're going to go and start a business, do something at that age, but then you still have that income that's guaranteed from the GEPF. So you're really getting two the best of both worlds. You've got a lump sum that you've taken out to help you with that business, but then you know that you've got this income for the rest of your life that really can meet your basic needs during that period. So I think you can also look at that. And again, though, it comes to financial planning, sitting down with somebody who can give you the best advice.
Because as you said in the beginning, it depends on how many years service would precede your early retirement and what the implications would be. So you can really do a very detailed comparison between taking early retirement at 56 and waiting until 60 and understanding what the implications are to base your decision on. I'm also hearing you say that when you showed us the slide, we saw only the first on withdrawal before retirement, only the first 25,000 was taxed at the 0 rate. But if I wait and I take even early retirement at 55, I'll get 500,000 taxed at a 0 rate. That's quite a big difference as well. Okay, important consideration. I also want to get back to the point you made right at the beginning about taking the lump sum and debt. You have obviously been having a lot of conversations with retirees, people planning for retirement in terms of what does my retirement look like? How important is it in your view to be debt-free at retirement? Do people plan to be debt-free generally? Is it important to plan to be debt-free? What are the conversations you've been having with planners?
Yeah, so the debt-free conversation is one of the most uncomfortable ones, because normally someone would have had a car up to that 2 years before they go on retirement, and they're thinking, oh my goodness, my car is not new enough at this point, I need a new car. And then they're taking a new car. But they are no longer thinking of buying a car. They are also going for it. Credit. Okay, so they have a car. But then again, the moment they retire, they decide to go and build a new house or buy a new home. And you know what? For some reason, homes are still available for someone who's going on retirement. So these are the things that they cause so much stress. When you have a long-term debt, you actually do worry about, what am I going to do with this? But also there's all these small loans and credit cards and all these small things that nobody thinks they're important until you actually have an income that is just good for taking care of you, an income that will no longer cater for everything else. All these small things, they just start to become a problem. So this is where people then start to say, I want to cash in more money out of my retirement so that I can start a business because I'm running out of money. And this is where all these problems start now. You find people being in money scams and just trying. So many people that have come to me, they've took their retirement money and put it in a money scam, and they are left with nothing. They start borrowing people money. They just start doing all sorts of things that are just totally wrong, and they go totally off track. And this is a person that could have retired comfortably, but then they actually left with nothing. So if you are going to want to have debt after retirement, have debt that you know why you're having it. Don't just have debt because, everybody when they retire, they buy a new house. Everybody when they retire, they change a location. Everybody when they retire, you must retire with a new car. I don't understand what's that whole thing around you need a new car when you retire, because where are you going? Seriously, during COVID, I hardly drive my car, and I'm like, do I even need this car? So why do people think you need a new car when you retire? You don't actually, I don't think you do. So, yeah.
That's such an interesting point. I want to explore that a little bit further.
Lisa, I'm going to interrupt there. Lucy, I was laughing because I wanted to share with you, I think with my slides to work, I want to share, this is an actual genuine, again, these are the kind of questions I get, and I always find them interesting. This was a conversation I was having on Twitter with a guy who said his mother had just retired and she wants to buy a bigger house, and with her payout, that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to take her cash and she wanted to buy a bigger house. So I sort of said, oh, okay, what did you do to rent the house out? You can see there. I'm like, so he says, yeah, no, she just wants a bigger house for no reason really. And she has car debt. So I was like, hold on, she's got car debt and she wants to take a lump sum and have a bigger house for no reason. She's retired. And I said, do you understand there's going to be rates and taxes and upkeep and all of these things? And she needs to live off this money. So there is, Bussy, it's so true. There's this lump sum that comes along and people think suddenly they're rich. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you that lump sum doesn't take you very far. If you're earning 20,000 Rand a month in retirement, and you live, till 80 odd, I mean, that's about 4.5 million rand of income that you will receive in retirement. So R1 million rand's not a lot of money. You need at least 4.5 million rand just to pay the bills. So I think, Buzi, it's so interesting because I see that again and again, and I have exactly the same engagements.
I think that's such a good point. Thank you, Maya. I think it's difficult to translate the amount of capital, which suddenly seems like a really big amount of capital, to understand for the rest of my life, the income that I'm going to be getting from that capital is not going to make me suddenly super wealthy that I can afford a bigger car and a bigger house, even though the capital may make it look that way. So I think that's very important to understand that you match the income with the capital amount. Busi, I want to get back to your point in terms of visualizing the retirement that I want. The one thing we often hear people say they battle to plan for is when their children will be independent, if ever. We're hearing more and more of children battling to find jobs to become financially independent, and it then becomes the responsibility of the parents into retirement, which then obviously has a very important impact on your retirement income as a parent. So can you tell us the conversations and the experience around that issue?
Yeah, that's another traumatic one, Giselle. That's really traumatic, because I can tell you that 70% of in those situations is actually the kids who have to take care of the parents, because the parents have really messed up. So also it happens that then the parent can no longer retire because this person never left the house. This person still needs grocery from you, but they're working and they just would love to buy stuff that they think, go out and pop, champagne bottles and all this. So it is so difficult when you haven't had the conversations with your kids. And this is the part where when I talk to parents is you need to love yourself enough to have the conversation with your kids, because sometimes these kids just do not have an idea what's going on. I mean, so many people will tell you that when my parents retired, I thought they were rich. And then I thought, oh no, now we're finally going to have a good life. I mean, all the time they've been saying, I don't have money. And then today they are finally rich. But if you did not sit down with them and tell them, actually, I am not even close to being rich, because they just think that, oh, well, my mom was taking care of us this happens with a lot of teachers, like Maya was saying. My mom was taking care of us the whole entire time. I didn't have to worry. I still lived at home. I just had to take care of my money and do whatever I wished. And then all of a sudden, mommy does not have money. It's a big problem, because mommy never said to them, from this day on, and prepare them 10 years, 5 years to say, there will be a day where I don't have money anymore, and this is what's going to happen. And then again, if the parent has made the biggest mistake, it is then when they finally have to sit down with the child and say, actually, I cannot even afford to breathe tomorrow. You need to take care of me, which is a very sad conversation again. So let us have the conversation. Money apparently is the worst thing people ever discuss at home, but we have to discuss them. There is so much hate that happens in homes where the parent has not said, we don't have money, or we have money. Everybody is just thinking you have money, but you don't have money. And then you start to want to show up everywhere with the little bit of money you have. And then one day it's finished, and then everybody thinks you are being funny. So let's have this conversation.
Absolutely. So just making sure that everybody understands, be open and make sure that everybody is part of the financial conversation. Thanks, Busi. I see so many questions in the chat. I want to highlight 2 questions, Maya, fairly technical. The one that we saw in MoneyWeb recently that I see is coming up in the chat as well is, why would somebody move to a private annuity at point of retirement from the GEPF is the one question. And the other one, which also I think flows from your earlier point, is if I leave the GEPF before retirement age, even early retirement age, what are my preservation options? Which I think is also such an important question. Do I take the cash? We saw the tax implications are really dreadful. What other preservation options do I have, and what would the tax implications be? So that's a mouthful. Can you give us?
Well, I think we're going to start off with So one of the questions was at retirement, moving out of GEPF. So you would need to. So again, it comes to this 10-year, less than 10 years of service, more than 10 years of service. Let's just start with that. So if you've had less than 10 years of service, you don't get the income in retirement. You actually get paid out the lump sum. So in that case, you really do need to think about what you're going to do, because it depends, of course, if you have other retirement assets, perhaps retirement annuities, other preservation funds. So you've got to see, how does this lump sum that you get paid out fit into all of that? And then how do you maximize your tax benefits? Because remember, on retirement, you do get your 500,000 Rand tax-free. So where do you take that from? Do you take it from the GEPF lump sum or your retirement annuity or any other thing? So you do need to sit down at that point and make sure you're looking at it holistically and how this is all going to work together. So for those, so that they, it makes a lot of sense then, to answer that question. Well, it all depends. You may only have 500,000 Rand, then you'd want to take that tax-free. You wouldn't want to move that into a living annuity, for example. But generally speaking, what I see when people have been with GEPF for more than 10 years and they're going to get the gratuity and they're going to get this income for life, their biggest reason for not staying with GEPF, well, there's two reasons. One is their concerns about the returns. So I don't know if you want to get into that now quickly. So I'm going to come back to the returns one, because I think that's a conversation on its own. But the other main reason is leaving money for their kids. And I see that coming through as a theme a lot on the chat. And I know a GEPF member, he was with GEPF, he's coming up for retirement, he has 8 million sitting in his fund. And he said to me, Maya, I'm not married, I've got 5 kids, I want to leave them a legacy. I've got all this 8 million. So that is one of the reasons we see, because what a living annuity does is you give you the option to leave. So if you die within the first few years or whenever you die, whatever lump sum is left within the living annuity goes to your dependents. And that's a big driver for this decision. First of all, you'd have to actually resign before you retire. So you couldn't just retire and transfer. You'd have to resign sort of 6 months before. So I think, again, this is a little dangerous. And again, you really need to know why you're doing it and for what purpose. Because again, living annuities are market related. So you will depend entirely on the market returns as to whether or not you can afford your retirement. So you could have gone through COVID and seen that the markets dropped by 36% last year. And, you could be moving into a living annuity at that point and suddenly realize you don't have 36% of your income was wiped out, of your capital was wiped out. So you have to understand the risk of a living annuity and make sure that you're not drawing down too much. We see a lot of people move into a living annuity and then drawing as much of the capital as they possibly can, and they are left destitute within a couple of years of retirement. The other thing is that a living annuity comes with costs. You have to pay an advisor, you have to pay product fees, and you can be pretty much paying on average about 2% a year. If you say the GEPF, there are no fees. So when I say to people, and especially this chap with his 8 million, I said to him, but you're going to get the gratuity. And the gratuity is, again, dependent on years of service, but on average, it works out to that 1/3 that we're quite familiar with in the private sector. Now, imagine if you have, 6 million, and because it's easier for me to work in numbers, as I say, you got 6 million, that means you're going to get a gratuity of 2 million. Well, what if 500,000 of that's tax-free? What if you invested that and you left it in an investment? And if you needed it at some point, because your income from the GEPF or whatever was you could always draw on it. But if you never needed it, it grows for your children. And over time, that is going to become a really big nest egg for them. So for me, you don't have to do either or. It's about what you do with that gratuity. And again, that comes to financial planning and sitting down and getting some really good advice as to how you meet all of these needs.
Okay. Can we get back to that point about where the money is invested if you retire and you stay within the GEPF? I think should members be worried about that?
So one of the big things, and sadly, I've seen a lot of unscrupulous financial advisors using this, and it makes me very angry. And in fact, I wrote a very strong article about it in the City Press. And that is this fear tactic. Government's going to steal all your money. They're investing it in bad investments, this, that, the other. You must take your money away from the GEPF. So first of all, GEPF's returns have actually been, since the ANC came to power in 1996, the GEPF has actually been self-funding. So under the old regime, the National Party, it was not self-funding. It is now self-funding. In other words, the market returns that the GEPF gets actually meets the needs of its members. However, and we know this from practice because this is what happened under the National Party, when there's insufficient money, say it doesn't grow enough, it's not the members' problem, it's taxpayers' problems. Because the GEPF has a contract that they will pay you based on years of service at a particular rate. Okay, that is it's a parliamentary act that has been passed. So the people who should be worrying about whether or not the GEPF performs as not GEPF members, although they are also taxpayers, but the general tax base. So that was what I'm always surprised that people worry so much about the GEPF. I'm more worried when you sit in a fund that's maybe in the private sector that has very high fees, for example, and it isn't performing for its members. That's more of a risk than a GEPF member whose income is guaranteed by the taxpayer. Yes, if South Africa starts having problems, meeting all its payments and it faces a lot of debt and all the rest of it, and we start imploding, which is some people's scenarios, let me tell you something, your private pensions are in as much trouble. Okay, so don't think that GEPF is going to be in more trouble than the private sector. And I think that's a very, very important one. And there is oversight and compliance within the GEPF, and actually as a fund, as I said, it is paying, it is actually self-funding at the moment, which is, by the way, we are one of the few pension funds in the world, government pension funds that's actually self-funding. In the rest of the world, they're all funded by taxpayers.
Thank you, Maya. I think that really, to me, sends the message that there's been a little bit of fear-mongering, not really justified at all. So GEPF members can actually have quite a sense of certainty in terms of the guarantees that they have and the significant fund benefits that they enjoy. So I think it's important never to lose sight of that, because you don't want to give up those benefits unless you really have a good reason. So the one question I also saw, which I thought was interesting, one of the possible reasons one may want to consider alternatives is if you have no dependents. So you don't have a spouse, you don't have any children. Is it still then to the benefit of the member to remain in the GEPF?
That's why I said that you do need to look at it from your perspective. And it may in that particular case. And, there is a spousal benefit with GEPF. So some people, I see someone said, but what if you don't have a spouse? Then what's the point of the spousal benefit? Just to keep in mind that if you marry in retirement, you get the spousal benefit. So even if at the age of 75, you're in the retirement village and you just, that man across the room just grabs your eye and you get married to him, you'll receive your pension should something happen to you. So it is an interesting fact that which is unlike a normal life annuity. So normally when you take out a life annuity in the private sector, if you don't take a spousal option at that point, you can't later on add it in, but in GEPF you can. But yes, as I said, I think there is a room for a living annuity. If you're independent, you don't have children, you don't have a spouse, you've got sitting with 8 million Rand benefit, go and do the comparisons. But please, when you do the comparisons, make sure you are doing it with like for like, in the sense that, that the drawdown rates are reasonable, that you're not sitting there thinking, oh, I'm going to draw down 15% of my income every year from my living annuity and be financially destitute in 5 years. It does need to be properly managed. You will pay for that management. So make sure you are making the correct comparisons.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I want to move on and talk to Busi about financial habits. But before we get there, Busi, there's one point I just want to emphasize. I think it was Mpho who put in the chat that if you have other retirement funds, and I really want to acknowledge that, I find that so comforting to see that there are people that are supplementing their pension fund with other retirement funds, either preserved funds from previous employers or additional personal retirement annuities. If you look at those GEPF benefits plus benefits from other funds, Maya, how does that all culminate at retirement in terms of the tax and the income?
Is that sorry, to me or to Busi?
No, that's to you. I'm going to get to Busi with financial habits. I just wanted to lift that one point out because I thought it was so to see that there are multiple funds that are being brought together here at retirement.
Absolutely. In fact, I think it's really great to have multiple. I really believe in multiple funds, because I think it allows you to really navigate and to create quite a lot more diversified financial planning in retirement. So for me, I see a whole lot of areas. I also look at, for example, over time, I think your tax-free savings accounts are also going to start becoming quite an important part of retirement, because they can give you a tax-free lump sum at retirement. And you can take it and it's flexible and all of those sorts of things. But then if you have a preservation fund, maybe because you had a previous employer, one of the rules with a preservation fund that's also very interesting is that you can still do a withdrawal before retirement, which is, unusual. It's not like a retirement annuity. So again, fully taxable if you take it. But and that's one of the questions we had earlier. If you don't take your money when you resign, what should you do with it? And a preservation fund is a really good option because of your ability to have a withdrawal later on. And although I must say, obviously there are new changes as well. But we won't go into that because it'll take us half an hour to get through the new Pension Fund Act changes. But and then you've got your retirement annuity. And the one thing is with your retirement annuity is that it is exactly the same as your GEPF in the sense that you could only take a third. Unless I think the value is, what is the computation value is, unless the fund is worth 247,000 Rand or less, then you can take it as a lump sum. Otherwise, 2/3 will need to be invested. But what's quite nice is, again, sitting with a financial planner, and maybe you get to your GEPF, you decide you're leaving the GEPF at the age of 60, but you've still got a retirement annuity. You don't have to retire from the retirement annuity. So you may find that at the age of 60, you're still going to do a little bit of work here and there. You can earn a little bit of income doing other things. So you only want to rely on your GEPF pension at that stage. But then you get a little bit older and you decide, I'm going to stop those odds and end jobs, and then I can trigger the income from my retirement annuity. So all of these pots allow you to really integrate and come up with a plan. But having a plan, and Bussi's going to confirm this, I am sure, having a plan is like the most important part of all of this, because you do not know how much you need until you've actually done the sums.
Thank you, Maya. Such important points. I want to move on to Bussi. Bussi, we've heard so much in terms of the technical questions and answers. If we take a step back and we look at the importance of planning, we've spoken about that. But let's just assume for a moment, as with many people, let's assume I have fallen into bad financial habits. I live day to day, I don't budget, I overspend quite often, I don't have a long-term plan in place. How do I go about changing that and fostering the right financial habits to get on track, especially if I still have quite a few years before retirement, to make sure that I give myself the best possible chance to have a good retirement plan and a good estate plan? What are the financial habits I should be pursuing, and how do I cultivate those habits?
Yeah, so financial habits are also based a lot on that fear factor that we talked about. But a lot of information that I've been seeing in the past 4 years or so is that a lot of people are changing their careers. A lot of people are finding out that I was this and I no longer want to be that. So the most important thing in everybody's life is that you earn an income and that income takes care of you. So when you're changing careers, normally that transition is a tricky one. So normally also, if you are transitioning correctly, you will have that same income come along with you. But sometimes if you are transitioning in a tight space, you might find that you actually have less income because you're starting a new career, you're starting a new business, you're starting a whole new life as you. So you normally find that your financial habits have to change. So one of the things that I always say is that we all know that we want to be comfortable, but sometimes being comfortable is not the first thing. So in your financial habits, if comfortability was always a main factor, but then now your life is changing or your life has changed, you need to then say, what is more important to me? Is this new business or is this new career that is important? Or it's my big car and where I live and what I eat, there are stores that people want to be seen at and all this kind of stuff. There are things that you want when you bring in people to see in your house and all that. So that lifestyle, you will have to have a conscious decision to say, I am choosing a different lifestyle because maybe I really want to check this next career that I'm starting at 50, and I want to do this for the next 20 years. And when I'm at 70, I want to have done so much. So when you're starting out, you have to make a conscious decision of saying, do I really want to see this work? And if you really want to see that work, you have to make the decision that my lifestyle, my habits have to change. But then again, if you do not have any problems and you do not have any debt, and all you have to do is take care of yourself, then maybe you should stay with the same habits you've had all your life. I mean, if you've lived for 50 years, it means you have been doing something correct to be at that point and be okay. So if your life is changing and you see that it's going to be different from what you've been living before, make sure that you make, and that's when I say make a conscious decision, I'm saying make an emotional decision, because when you've made an emotional decision, you will be able to follow through. When you just say, oh, I will no longer eat that and that, I will only, I will no longer eat bread with 5 other things, I will only eat bread with peanut butter. You will not be able to enjoy the bread with peanut butter if you haven't made the emotional decision. But if you have, you will not see any problem with having bread and peanut butter. You will actually do well with that. So we have to, money is an emotional thing. We have to always take the emotional part of it very seriously, because then we are able to just do it so easily. But if we haven't taken the emotional part, just like I was saying, sit down with your spouse and tell them, I am changing careers. I might no longer be able to pop in this much in the household, because I am thinking in the next 5 years, I'm going to be building a new dream for myself. Have that conversation so that they know that they shouldn't be taking an early retirement because you guys can no longer afford it. But then we don't have these conversations. And then all of a sudden they have a plan, you have a plan, and these plans don't work well. And that's why people are always having midlife crisis, because of money. And money is, of course, the biggest problem in relationships and all these kind of things. So let us have the emotional part of it worked on as much as we're having the technical part. When we do the emotional part, the technical part becomes so easy. You can actually go to a financial advisor and have a very effective conversation with them, not going there with fear and trying, how much can I get out? How much can I get out? Can I get it today? And you could have stayed 2-3 years and actually got more. So yeah.
Thank you, Busi. I'm hearing you say that there's a lot of sacrifice, compromise, and I need to understand and have the conversation with my spouse. So if I want to take early retirement, I need to get the support of my spouse. In terms of that emotional shift, in terms of I'm going to sacrifice that new car that I would love, because for that sacrifice, I get to retire earlier to go and study full time, for instance. That really makes sense to me. In your experience, are people able to make that compromise and emotional shift by themselves? Or do they often use and successfully then make the shift if they've got a coach or a financial advisor that they speak to about that compromise or shift?
Mm-hmm. So it's always important to have someone that can help you out, because of course this is a very emotional topic. So when we have an emotional topic in our life, we normally do not think clearly. I mean, if you're having a fight with your spouse and you tell your mom about it, your mom is not going to give you the purest of advice. She's going to think, oh, this is my child, let's go kill him, whatever that needs to happen. So you do not want to do this by yourself, because you are way too emotionally involved. So when you go to someone and say, you know what, my plan is I want to start a business after this. My plan is that I want to retire early and take care of my grandkids. My plan is this. They will then ask you the relevant questions of things that are there in your life, but you don't see as a problem. Then they will say, have you thought of this? Do you know this? This is also important. Like all these charts that Maya has been showing us. These are people that actually they are too invested emotionally in their problems that they don't see the big picture. So it's very important to go and sit down with somebody who can say to you, have you thought of this? Are you thinking of this? Even if it's in your head, it looks perfect. It looks like it's going to work. Just go by and ask somebody to say, I think this is the perfect plan. But just look at it just in case. You will be shocked of what can come out of it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Busi. I think the importance of Yes, Maya, you want to add to that? Go for it.
Yeah, no, actually, I would like to also just, obviously we're talking about lifestyle and that, and I'm seeing a lot of questions coming through of why don't I just cash in and pay off my debt? And I've seen another one, should I take early retirement and clear debt, clear debt, clear debt? And I'd love to get Bussi's take on it. But for me, I am actually very anti that approach, because what changes? What changes? Why do you have credit card debt? What's going to change between now and after the debt's paid off? Because there's something in your lifestyle that's making you spend more than you earn, because that's the only reason you get into credit card debt. You're spending more than you earn. And all you're doing is getting into the cycle. So you're going to get a lump sum, settle it, but you haven't changed your anything. And I can guarantee you, I haven't come across anyone who's done that, who 3 years later I find in a better position, because nothing's changed. And all that's happened is they've depleted their pension fund. And one of the reasons people always say, yes, but I'm paying interest. Yes, you are paying interest. But if you have a debt repayment plan, you target that money, you could be out of debt in 1 or 2, 3 years. What you're doing, the long-term consequences to your retirement is much bigger. And that is because of compounding. So compounding, we know, for example, that if your returns are growing at 10% a year, okay, and obviously GEPF is slightly different because you're getting years of service, but if you're getting 10% a year return on your money, that means every 7 years your money doubles. So if you're thinking 100,000 is not a lot of money, it goes from 100 to 200, 400, 800. That's what compounding does. It doesn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It goes 2, 4, 8, 1.6 million. And that is what basically from the day that you start contributing towards your retirement, if you do that for your whole lifetime, only 1/3 comes from contributions. The rest is growth. So when you cash in, you take away that growth opportunity. So I would say, my first start is to sit there and say, right, how do I handle this debt? What changes do I need to make in my day-to-day life that I find that extra cash? And I run something called the Money Makeover Challenge. We've proven this every single year. They find 2,000-3,000 Rand in their budgets because money's getting, it's here, it's that kind of spending. Look for it, you'll find it, target those debts, pay them off. And let me tell you, when you spend time paying off debt, you don't go back into it. When you start using windfalls, you go back into it. So I'm quite anti that. But Bussi, maybe you've got a different view.
and as Maya is saying, debt is an emotional problem. It's not a physical problem. So when you have flu, you know you have flu because you're coughing and you have a temperature and this is happening. But that is not the flu. The flu is a virus inside of your system that you can't touch and see. The only way you can see it is because you are having these symptoms. So debt is just a symptom, and you only get into debt because you fear something. But if you go and take a lump sum and pay it off, tomorrow that virus is still in your system. You're going to create a new debt. Now, what are you going to pay this debt with when you actually do not have any money any longer? And this happens every time. So when you're taking your payout and you paying debt, it's like you borrow from Peter to pay John. We all know how that ends like. It never works. So the way you got into the debt, try and make sure that you understand how you got here so that when you take yourself out, you do not come back to this position. So anybody who has ever went and borrowed more money to pay a debt, they always will tell you 100% of the time, they went back to the same amount of debt, but then now they were owing two pay basis.
Thank you.
Please don't do that.
So it gets back to that point you were making about the financial habits. It's the habit, the root, the virus that you need to address. But see, that's such a good analogy given the way we are with the pandemic. It's that virus inside that you need to address, not the symptom of the virus. Thank you. I want to make a quick comment on some of the comments I've seen in the chat also about finding a financial advisor. I think if you have a financial advisor that approaches you just before retirement, you haven't had a long-standing relationship, it's important that you make sure that it's a financial advisor that is technically really able to assist you with good advice and that will look after your interest as a retiring member. So I think Maya also made the point earlier, there are financial advisors out there that are not doing what's best for their customers. We've seen fear-mongering, unnecessary fear-mongering that has destroyed value for GEPF members. So it's important. I also feel a little bit frustrated because I'm seeing so many technical individual questions that I would love to be able to respond to all of them, but we simply don't have the time. The best way forward is to find an advisor And we've got a function on the Old Mutual website called Find an Advisor, where you can get hold of an advisor that can help you with all those individual personal questions. Do make sure that you find an advisor that is really able to look after your best interests and answer all the technical questions. We have a GEPF tool where the advisor can calculate all the benefits to answer all those benefit technical questions. We also have an income sustainability tool where, exactly as Maya said, it explains to you how much can you withdraw from a private annuity that will still make sure that your capital is sustainable during your lifetime, that you don't compromise and take a great short-term income, but over the long time, you know you're going to exhaust your capital. So please find an advisor that can help you on that journey. I think that is so important and valuable. We've got 1 minute left, Maya. I'm going to put you on the spot and end off with a very contentious question. We've seen frustration in the media, GEPF members not getting answers with the administration. What recourse would a member have where there's that frustration that I'm asking questions in terms of my benefits and getting no response?
Joey, I get a lot of those. So I know they are a big frustration. And what it seems to be is it does seem to be the HR issues. So it's not so much the GEPF fund, it's the HR. So we're seeing that when people resign or retire or there's a death, the paperwork with their employer. So remember, their GEPF is the fund for the whole of government, but there's all these employers underneath. It could be health, education, policing. So that is where a lot of the problems are sitting. And unfortunately, it is literally about hammering on the door of HR over and over again. You can go to GEPF, but if GEPF doesn't have the paperwork that they needed from the employer, they can't do anything. So one of the bit of advice I would have is that if you are coming up to retirement, literally 6 months before you retire, start with the paperwork. Go to HR, make sure that the years of service are correctly, captured. Start bugging them. Make it like your full-time job just to annoy the living daylights out of your HR department. But that is a big problem, and I think it's a big issue. And to be perfectly honest, I think that's some of the reasons why people want to leave GEPF, that want to resign, because they see all these issues. But it is coming at employer level. So, yeah, I don't think we should pretend that doesn't exist, because it is a big issue. And as I said, I see some departments much better than others.
Thank you very much, Maya. That was a very quick few seconds answer to a very topical question. But I think it answered the question. Thank you very much. I want to thank everybody for their participation. It's been wonderful seeing all the activity in the chat. I hope everybody managed to answer the few polls we saw as well. It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to engaging with you on a more individual level with the Old Mutual advisors to help you with further questions and assistance. Thank you to the panelists. It's been wonderful having you here and having you involved in the conversation. Thank you. Have a good Monday.
Thank you.
So much.